The leftover egg we found in the woods. Opened that at home. Ooh, yeah.
All year with his English classes, they never would give him
The proverbial.
Work to do. So they keep calling for that. Finally, he got some, and he didn't give them. Anyway, he's in the grade.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. David, do they have we have a box of books if they want to write on the inside. Yes, sir, right. Go through the opening, make a right, make an immediate left. Good morning, everyone. We are on page 214, and we stopped with the faith of the Syro-Phoenician woman. And so, and today we are going to make it to the story I wanted to go over on last week, but we just didn't have time. Also, it is the 20th of August, so we have one more Sunday, which makes the 27th, and then it will be September. So I don't even know where this
Closer to Christmas.
Yes, it is. And I don't even know. I don't even know what happened to the summer, and we're already in the 20th of August. So it's quick year. So starting at the bottom of 214, faith of the Syro-Phoenician woman. Jesus' previous activity had been in Galilee, but now he withdrew to the area of Tyre and Sidon. And information on Jesus' miraculous activity had reached this area. So otherwise, if people didn't know what Jesus was doing, at least at some level, they wouldn't be showing up with all of these issues, all these, I need curing, I need, health, I have these issues. So obviously, when he shows up, we see a large group of people, even at the feeding of the 5,000, 4,000. You see these large groups of people that are showing up to see Jesus, and they have an expectation that if they can get close or show up and talk to him, that they can be healed. But what you don't see is this life-altering commitment. We have found the Messiah. He is here with us, and we are going to now base our life on what he says. And even though what Jesus says is really hard to accept and understand, then there's only two choices. Either we discount because it's hard to understand, why are we changing so much, or we let go. And if we let go, then we can grab onto what Jesus is telling us, and we can now base our life on that. And that's the same issue today, that when you hear the gospel message, it is one that requires that either you hang on to what you have and you don't change because of I'm going to lose all this and we don't want to lose it, or can I see what I'm gaining? I'm gaining a relationship with God. I'm gaining forgiveness through Christ. I'm gaining salvation. And so we would just naturally just give it all up. But if we truly could see what the future will bring and the consequences of the choice, then that would have a huge. But we don't have that. What we have is the choice right now. And that's the question. What is the cost? And the cost is everything. I have to give up everything for my old life. So here we are. Jesus has reached this area, and the desperate mother came with a request for Jesus. And so once again, people are, if I can just get close to Jesus. We saw it with the woman who was bleeding. If I could just get close enough to touch him, if I could get and if I could have Jesus come, they could, there's all these things. So here, this woman has heard. Now, this woman is a lot different than the other women. And this is what we see. And the desperate mother came with a request for Jesus. Jesus comments in Mark 7, 27 probably represent a popular proverb and not his opinion. And that's about the scraps on a table, right? So he said he used the comment to lead the woman to recognize that her only hope lay for help lay in casting herself, a Gentile though she was, on God's great mercy. So, yeah, I mean, because she's not a Jew, she's outside of Abraham and the Jewish nation. The Jews really had no reason to believe that the Messiah was coming for the Gentiles too. The Gentiles, they see what's happening, and she realizes my need is so great, no one can help me but Jesus. And so the woman gladly accepted her position as an outsider and claimed healing for her daughter. Jesus' reply highlighted the depth of her faith in Matthew 15:28, right? So when Jesus, and now remember, the crowd is here too. So when Jesus would have said this in front of everyone, and that woman is like, well, even the dogs feed on the table scraps, is my paraphrase. Then what did Jesus do? Yeah, he replied to her request, right? And then Jesus' reply highlighted the depth of her faith. So that's the Gentile woman's request was granted. But then think about if you're the Jewish crowd. What did this mean? Now we think he's the Messiah. We really like what he's doing. Even if we're not sure he's the Messiah, we still really like what he's doing, right? And now a Gentile, she doesn't even, not one of us. And what does Jesus do? Tells a short story in front of everyone. Yes.
And your faith is great. He raises her up high.
Yes.
And so that
because they could have said your faith is as good as the Jews, right? That was an option, right? Your faith is just as good as everyone else's. So, but that's not the case. Her faith is great. And so we see the same type of comment for the centurion, right?
Right. I was assuming that.
Yes. Now, once again, oh, here are the people who have taken us over. They're ruling the country. We have horrible taxes. We don't like it. We don't have our own rulers. And now that guy came and the same type of thing. He's not even one of us. And Jesus keeps healing and doing what they ask. And then it'd be one thing if he was just doing what they ask. Then he makes comments, right? And both of these people are outside of Judaism, and the comment is how large is their faith. So if their faith is that large, it's in comparison to the Jews that he came to, whose faith isn't. So yeah, so when the hearers that were the Jews are there and they're listening to this, that's a pretty bad, that would be shocking once again. Their faith is bigger than my faith, and she gets a congratulation from Jesus about her faith. Yeah, so that is part of, and we're going to see also today when we get over to the next page. Now remember, if you read through the New Testament and you pick a disciple and then see how long it took him to reach a point where he really understood who Jesus was in a complete way. And that's something to think about when you are talking to somebody, is if Jesus' disciples just weren't right like that and I totally understand what you're saying. We need to remember that in discipling and witnessing to people is it's going to take a little bit for them to reach a point where they go, I need a savior, because the aspect of both Jesus and you need a savior is also the aspect of I'm a sinner. I'm not good. I'm not the good person I thought I was. I'm a sinner and I deserve hell for my life. I deserve hell. And that's, So as we look at this, we'll see how the disciples also, their development in understanding Jesus changes. So now we have healing a deaf man and feeding 4,000. So the miracle in Mark 7:31-37 took place in the Decapolis, a predominantly Gentile area, right? In this miracle, Jesus opened the ears of a deaf man. He showed the man what he was doing by putting his fingers in his ears, spitting and touching his tongue, and glancing upward to heaven in prayer. In these actions, Jesus described to the man in need and the source of the healing in a type of sign language that he could understand, because he can't hear. Right. So the crowd marveled at Jesus' miracle, but still failed to understand the true nature. They were all, can you believe what just happened? But in seeing the miracle, they didn't make it to a point where they saw that the miracles confirmed the message. And the message is he's the Messiah. Now, the feeding of the 4,000 contains too many differences from the previous feeding, as we've already talked about, to be a variant account of the same incident. The miracle was a response by Jesus to the hunger of the crowd that had followed him for 3 days. The disciples apparently failed to learn from the first miracle that limited resources did not hinder Jesus' ability to perform miracles. Jesus' miracle didn't rely on how much people provided. The miracle is, how much does God provide? So if you only have a few fish and you're asking, how can we do this? Then you're looking at the resources provided. And you're not asking, well, what will God give us? God gave us the whole earth. This is a focus on who's providing, God or man. So the baskets containing the leftovers from this miracle were flexible bags, the type used to lower Paul over the wall in Acts 9:25. So those things are big, right? The baskets used to hold the leftovers in the early feed miracle were stiff wicker baskets. Also, the number of leftovers baskets differed from the first miracle. Furthermore, the two incidents occurred at two different shores of the Sea of Galilee, most clearly seen in Mark 8, verse 10. The disciples' response in Matthew 15:33 would seem unusual if they had seen the earlier miracle. So we can account for the spiritual obtuseness by realizing that they were slow to recognize religious truths from Jesus. See the response in Matthew 16:5-12. So now we have, and we're turning the page. We have the disciples with Jesus seeing all that's going on. They're not part of the crowds that heard Jesus did something and now they're showing up, right? These other cities, we've heard about Jesus. We know if we show up that if we have a need, he can heal us no matter what, right? He can even raise the dead. So that is a word of mouth story that exists in a town that you show up in. That's different than I'm spending my whole, these years traveling with Jesus, and I personally see all the stuff that he does. And so that, so we like to give ourselves more credit, by comparing us to them and say, well, if I saw that, I would have turned on day one, right? I would be following, I would have recognized him on day one as the Savior, that first miracle, count me all in, right? So, but that's the same way today. We say that, but it's like, really, you're not accepting the message any better or any quicker probably than these first century time with Jesus. So Messianic signs, and now we have the verses in Matthew and Mark. Now, when the religious leaders are a group that is just amazing because they know the miracles are happening. You can't discount somebody being raised from the dead. That's pretty hard. You can't discount people being cured of all sorts of issues. You can't discount there's no food and Jesus fed everyone twice. I mean, these are a lot of things you just can't discount. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees don't get along anyway. Because when Paul, remember, he gets them into a fight by saying, we're here because we believe in, and then as soon as he says that, the two groups want to argue. So with that, Jesus is changing Judaism. The Judaism they know is ending. The high priest is ending. The sacrificial system is ending. All of these things. Jesus is talking about relationships, forgiveness, all of these things. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees formed an unholy alliance to take joint action against Jesus. Jesus credited them with the intelligence to discern the signs of changing weather, but castigated their failure to recognize the signs of the Messiah already at work in his ministry. Because if they accept who he is, just like regular people, they have to give up what they had to grab hold of the Messiah. And they have to, when the Messiah is teaching all sorts of hard things to accept. And so we would have to go beyond our own, deeply held convictions about what is it to be a Jew and worship God. And we have to give that up. We have to say, oh, now we're going to be doing what the Messiah says, and we're going to worship in a different way. And we're going to have a relationship. High priest goes away. Forgiveness of sin, we're going to find later. The sacrificial system goes away. We have the Gentiles get to come. We don't have unclean food. There's a huge, it changed a lot of what they believe.
Like a tax collector, like he had to go back and I will repay all I took. These Pharisees will have to go back and say, we were wrong.
We don't, that's a tough, yes, but
Yeah.
when you recognize the truth and you've been telling everyone else wrong, you have a responsibility to go back and say, I found the Messiah. I was wrong. Everything I told you about how to have a relationship we need to start over, right?
But then all their worldly things would have to go away too.
And we have to stop worrying about social reform, and we have to stop worrying about political reform. And Jesus already said, whose face is on the coin, right? So we should be giving unto Caesar what's Caesar and give to God what's God. So there is just a whole bunch of things we don't like about this message. But in life today, there's a whole bunch of things we don't like about the message. I have to give up my previously held convictions and views about what's right and wrong. Because until you're a Christian, who sets right and wrong? We can say, I do, society does. I can pick and choose what society says and go, I like that, I don't like it. But when you become a Christian, now you have to say, God dictates right and wrong. I don't get a vote. And we have to say, how do I measure my life? Not against my standards, but against what does God say? And anytime we're reading the Bible and it conflicts, we're like, I don't like that. Join everybody else who's ever read the Bible. Of course you don't like it, because it conflicts with me and it conflicts with what I want to do. So every time you read it, it is going to go, and when you read it, whatever it is, you're like, I don't like that. You're still faced with two choices. I'm Christian for years, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize I hadn't let go of that, because it bothers me when it says to let go. So now I have to let go of that too. So the whole time you're a Christian, and that's why you don't stop reading the Bible. The Bible is, what does God expect? It's his story to us. And throughout, it's going to confront you, and it's going to show you, how does God want me to respond when I'm angry? how am I supposed to respond to that coworker who, is the thorn at work? How do I respond to? And it has all of these things, and we have to continually read it so that it will continually confront us and say, I haven't let go yet. I didn't know I was holding on to this. I gotta let go of it, and it's a struggle to let go. So Jesus rebuked them. Now, the leaven of the Pharisees was hypocrisy. See Mark 7:6. The leaven of Herod, leaven of the Sadducees in Matthew 16:6 is likely a reference to worldly self-seeking. The mention of the two feedings in Mark 8:19-20 is evidence of their historicity. So here's what we want to do. So I want to, if you would, turn to Mark 8, and we're going to go to 13. Let me do it. Mark 8:13-26. That's not the one. Give me 1 second. There it is. So we're going to go to, like I said, Mark 8, Mark 8:13. And it says, and he left them, and entering into the boat again, he departed to the other side. So what happened was, the Pharisees demanded a sign, right? And so that's what we just talked about. They demanded a sign, and Jesus wasn't going to give them one. Now, the story before that in the beginning of Mark is the feeding of the 4,000, right? So just to keep the flow. So we fed the 4,000. The Pharisees demand a sign, and he tells them there shall be no sign given to this generation. He departed, and now we're at 14. And the disciples had forgotten to take loaves, and they did not have more than one loaf in the boat with them, right? So time to eat, and now we forgot to bring more food. And so this is what they're thinking about, right? Oh, we didn't bring food, right? So then we said, and he charged them, saying, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. Now, they just saw and ate the feeding of the 4,000. They previously had the 5,000. He talked to the Pharisees and the Sadducees right before they get in the boat. They look in the basket and they're like, oh, we forgot to bring enough for dinner, right? So, and then Jesus warns them about the problems with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? Jesus is giving them a warning. It's the same day, it just a little time has passed, we went to the boat. And now we have the response in 16. Now these are the people who lived with Jesus day and night. And they reason among themselves, saying, it is because we have no loaves. He's warning us about, he's telling us this story. We totally miss it. We're still stuck on, oh, he knows we don't have but one loaf of bread. So we have this great learning point. He's already confronted the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We get in the boat. Jesus warns them about those people, and they're like, oh, he knows we only have one loaf. So now we go back to, and knowing it, the previous verse, Jesus said to them, why do you reason that it is because you have no loaves? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Have you still hardened your hearts? Do you have eyes and you don't see, and you have ears and you don't hear, and you do not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves among 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments did you take up? They said to him, 12. And when the 7 among the 4,000, how many lunch baskets full of fragments did you take up? And they said, 7. And he said to them, how do you not understand? So he's giving them warning about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Pharisees, the hypocrisy, and the Sadducees, like the reference to worldly self-seeking. So he's using a teaching moment right after he rebuked the two groups. And because, leaven in dough, you just put a little bit in, it goes through the whole loaf, right? Spreads just a little bit, goes everywhere. That's how we make bread rise. So with that, Jesus is giving a teaching moment, and they're going, he knows we forgot bread. We only have one loaf. And so then, and that's all they got out of it. We don't have enough bread. And so Jesus confronts them and says, you don't even remember we just had 5 loaves and I fed 5,000 people. And then we had 7 among 4,000, and we still had all these leftovers. So in simple math, if we have 1 piece of bread off the first story, we would be able to feed 1,000 people. Right? I mean, that's what happened last time. We had 5 loaves, we fed 5,000 people. So, and here because remember, we don't focus on what we provide, we focus on what God does with what is there. And so the disciples like, oh, he does know we only have 1 loaf. And who was responsible for bringing the other loaves? We're feeling like, what are we going to do? How are we going to eat? And these are the same people who just witnessed. And that's what Jesus normally, when they say, we have this, it says you have eyes and don't see and ears and not hear, right? That's a recurring type of statement you see Jesus say, except, and you don't remember. And so then he reminds them, right? How many people did we feed? How much was left over? It wasn't just enough food. It was when God provided and there was 5,000 people there, he just didn't provide enough. He provided so that everyone ate. And when it was over, we had 12 baskets full of food. There was plenty of food. It was not only enough, God provides more than what we needed. They're missing that. And with the 4, the 7 among the 4,000, they still took up 7 bigger baskets of food. And so then how do you not understand? So it's easy for us to read through it and go, oh, I can't believe they didn't understand that, right? Because we have the whole end of the story. We have being filled with the Spirit. We have the whole church. We have the whole story. But living it as they did, they're still not seeing who he is. They're just not. Obviously, they're worried about what are we going to eat for dinner. So that is that's just one of the odd things about you're worried about, you're walking and living with the Messiah, and he fed all those hungry people that aren't part of his missionary team, his discipleship team. I'm pretty sure Jesus is going to take care of you, right? So then we move on. We have Peter's confession of Jesus' messiahship. And that's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And we see the verses. So this section represents the clearest messianic declaration by Jesus up to this point in his ministry, right? Because the ministry builds, and so does the message of who Jesus is. Although much of his previous teaching clearly moved in this direction, Peter's answer to Jesus' question shows that the disciples' grasp of his messianic role had progressed far beyond the nationalistic understanding of the general public, and that Peter understood that something about Jesus' special relationship with God. So that's a big step forward. That is the step forward of Jesus isn't just here as the freer of the Jews. And it's also, Jesus isn't just here as a prophet that rose up. right? He's not like a better Moses. He's not in the sense of Moses was a human that God called out to be a prophet. Abraham was called out. All these other people were called out. Jesus came down. He left the Father and came. So now they're starting to understand this Jesus special relationship with God. So Jesus' statement in Matthew 16:18 played on the meaning of Peter's name, rock or stone. The metaphor was more description of Peter's function than his character. Peter was the foundation stone for the early church. He was not being installed as the first pope. He was a representative of the entire apostolic group. And then you see the same metaphor applied to all the apostles in Ephesians 2:20. So the keys of the kingdom do not represent authority to regulate admission into the church. We're on top of 2:17, this first full paragraph. Nor are they a reference to binding and loosing Satan, despite the fact that binding is sometimes used in reference to Satan. See Mark 3:27. Binding and loosing represented the right of the church on earth to determine and apply decisions previously made in heaven. Peter exercised this authority when he pioneered the extension of the gospel to the Gentile converts. See Acts 10:1-11 and verse 18. Ultimately, the authority to bind and loose belongs to the entire church in extending forgiveness to those whom God has pardoned. See Matthew 8:18. We are here to reach the lost. Wouldn't it be nice if, as soon as you're saved, and we've let go with all the earthly problems, and there's a lot of problems. We have everything from different people problems, family problems, health problems, finance problems, political problems. The house needs to have work done on it. There's just all these problems in life. And if the plan was you get saved and you get called home, I am leaving right now. I am going. But that's not the plan. The plan is we leave when our work is done. And Jesus told us what the work was to be done, especially at his ascension. Go, make disciples, right? So with that, that's part of, if you never had a purpose in your life, and most people really don't have like I know what my purpose is. Jesus gives it to us. You're already saved. We don't have to worry about death. We don't have to worry about judgment. We don't have to worry about where we go. In fact, we get some small descriptions on where we go, and it is going to be no expense spared, right? Walk on the gold. It's just going to be, we're there with God. And how's the new life? There's no tears, there's no sickness, there's no nothing, right? So if we know all of that right now, and that's where we're going, and then we're told before you come, you got to reach other people. You have to reach the lost and let them know. We want you to start with you're a parent. Reach your children, of course. Reach your extended family. You're doing this all at the same time. Reach your neighborhood, reach your community. And it'd be good if you help support other people that are going to entire areas that have never heard the word. And that's where we get supporting missionaries from. So with that, and we don't have to worry about any part of the future. And we've already been given a small warning about how it ends, right? It ends pretty bad. But in God telling us the warning of this is how it's going to end, now we don't have to worry about things getting out of control. No matter how bad it is, no matter who's at war, no matter what's going on, no matter what the economy is doing, God was never surprised. It's never a surprise. It's not out of control. We're going through, and now we don't have anything to worry about for the first time in our lives. We don't have to worry about anything. The only thing we have to do is reach the lost. And so in giving that word of salvation to the lost, that's what we do while we wait to go home. And we want to think about this. The church that we have now, David, you'll probably know. Do you know when the mortgage was paid off?
Where?
Or is our mortgage paid?
Oh, yeah. I don't think, it's been a long, long time ago. I don't know
So,
if we have
so, but that's important.
Oh, yeah,
So,
years.
At least 30 years.
see, just wanted to make sure. So for the act, so with this analogy, the people that we don't know, for the most of us, paid for the church. And how did we get the church? They gave it to us. Right?
Yeah.
We didn't like buy into it. It's not a timeshare. We don't buy into it. So those people before us paid for the entire church that we have today. So think about this, like, our youth group, right? In 15 years, they will be the adults. And some of us in 15 years will have gone home, literally, right? So when our role is in discipling new members, especially people in their 20s and 30s, they have to know what to do because we're giving them a paid for church. We're giving them paid for property. We're giving them all these things. They don't even have to budget how much is the mortgage. That's all been done before us even, right? So we have to make sure that our discipleship program and teaching new Christians allows them to know what are they supposed to do. And what are they supposed to do is they're supposed to keep their own church body together and invest in the lost. Because somebody else already paid it off for us. We didn't. Yeah, it's all paid for. So, so when we talk about this and we talk about the church, imagine if, you would be ecstatic if when you became an adult a few years later, somebody you don't know said, I know it's tough being an adult. Here's a home. Clear, free and clear. And I don't want you to sell it. I want you to look for somebody that before you die, you're able to give this home to free and clear. And that's what we're doing. But in addition, we're saying, what do I do as a Christian? We have to teach that. And we have to make sure that the people that are coming today, we're preparing so that I'm leaving. It's a guarantee. I mean, we can't guarantee much. We guarantee Al is leaving, right? Al is one way or the other. Even if Al is 95, I'll still be saying, I'm probably really close to leaving, right? But that thought is, when you look at us and what we do, we have to make sure. I see a bunch of gray-haired people in here, me being one of them, right? Who are we turning over to? Who are we teaching how to do church? Who are we teaching how to disciple? Who are we teaching the gospel message so that they will teach the gospel message? So that is, what are we doing? And then Jesus had to silence the public proclamation of the Messiah insights by his disciples because of the inadequate grasp of the Messiah role. Peter's response illustrates this deficiency in Matthew 16:22-23. So they understand Jesus over time. Even though they're with him every day, they do it. Because what happens when Jesus is crucified? To the disciples.
Oh, they scattered.
And what do they think happened?
It's over.
It's over, right? Yeah, it's over. Oh my, he died. Yeah, he died. We were so close, and then Jesus died. So the whole thing, and so in Acts, you see a change in the disciples, right? The disciples stop looking at just the landscape, the politics, the religious, everything. and they move totally to, I've got this gospel message and I'm sharing it on an individual level with you. And and then they presented the gospel, right? Then all of a sudden it went from a message that was just in Jerusalem. And then you see missionaries they're all over the place, right? And the disciples some of them are making missionary trips, and they're wanting to make sure that these other countries, the Christians who first start accepting Christ, that they have a foundation, right? And we see the letters, we still use the letters today, right? Everything after Acts minus Revelation, because Revelation is to reassure, to let us know God knows how it's ending. But everything in between is telling and addressing church issues, right? And that's why we read those books, and they can be written to us, right? It talks, there's all sorts of issues going on. And so that they've shifted the focus from what's the Messiah going to do? And I think he's going to change Israel. I think, nope. Once we have Acts and we're filled with the Spirit, then they realize what did Jesus really do? He saved us. He didn't save us from the Romans, because that was a short-term thing. If he saved us for the Romans, what would we be doing with salvation today? We don't, this is a permanent salvation, a permanent from sin, because sin is what came into the world. Sin broke the relationship. And how can we restore a relationship? Jesus, because Jesus paid the price for our sins. Now I'm not worried about the price of my sin anymore. It's already paid. All that's done. So now all we have to do is reach the lost. Great plan. Because you would think, well, why don't we just send angels down to do that? I tell you what, I know they would be better at it. And I've got a few people right on the top of my list. I would ask the angel come down and have a big, scary, you have got to get your life right event, right? You'd be like, I want to see flames. I want to see a talk about destruction, all of that. That would probably work better than my just normal talks. But the reality is, Jesus gave it to us. He gave us the message. So that is where we're at today. So here we are. I'm making a big stop. We're going to stop on 217, and we have predicting the passion and bearing the cross. That's what we'll pick up. David, if you would end us.
Dear Father, thank you for allowing us to come to your house and study and to listen to how you were preparing the disciples, and how you take time to prepare us to be able to go and share the same message. We just pray that you will continue to prepare us, help us to study and to be the witness we need to be, and that we can go and tell those around us about you and what you have in store for them, and what you have for them in the way of salvation. I just pray that you will lead and guide us, and pray that you will be with those that are out there on the mission field sharing. Pray that you will put a hedge of protection around them, dear Lord. And I just pray that you will be with us as we go into the service this morning. Be with Brother John as he prepares to bring the message to Lord. All these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.